such an exciting morning already with Joseph's baptism that I don't know that we need a sermon. But since I wrote one, I'll go ahead and share it with you. Did you know that if there is any story in the Bible, any Bible passage that has lost its original punch, it may well be the story of the Good Samaritan. Now I say that for this reason. We all know what it means to be a Good Samaritan. It means to help someone who you don't know who is in need. And we often would say that the moral of this story is that if you're out and about and you see someone who needs help, you should help them. And all that is good. Those are good things to believe and to do. But all of that totally ignores the fact that when Jesus told this story, it was considered absolutely, positively scandalous, overwhelming, unacceptable, horrific. I can't hardly think of another word. It was considered unbelievable. They couldn't believe that the words came out of his mouth. Now, why would I say that? It's because the Jews, who were the listeners of the story, held Samaritans in contempt and had the Samaritan placed in the role of the rescuer was scandalous, unheard of. There's a Bible scholar whose name is Amy Jill Levine, and she tries to help us understand this by saying that we should imagine that we are the person lying in the ditch. And we should think about who is the person or the group of people who we so despise that we would rather die. We would rather suffer than have that person or that group of people help us and then have to admit that they helped us. Or, conversely, what group of people or what person would rather die than be compelled to help us? If you could think of someone who fits what I just described, then that's the situation for the Samaritan. In order to make her point, Dr. Levine was doing a lecture on this story to a group of people who were very much affected by the events on 9/11. And so, as she talks about the story, she says to them, the one who was kind, the one who was the neighbor, the one who was the example of goodness was a member of Al-Qaeda. That's the kind of shock value that would have occurred when Jesus told this story. Because he's saying that someone who is a despised foreigner, someone who is considered to be godless, someone who is beyond the realm of acceptability, has been used by God to do good. This is scandalous. And that's what I mean when I say that this story has lost its punch. Because we tend to think, oh, you know, someone runs out of gas, let's give them a little gas, and then we've been a good Samaritan. But there's a lot more to this than that. This man, the Samaritan in the story, went out of his way to do good, which the Jews would not have been able to accept. Far more good than the Jewish good guys in the story. In the story, the priest and the Levite see a severely injured man and they cross the road to avoid him. Now, to be fair, there may have been perfectly good reason for that. Remember that they are religious people. They're following the law. They know that if they encounter a dead body or they come in contact with human blood, then they will be defiled and unable to participate in worship. So, there may have been good reason in the story for them to cross the road. That, as well as the fact that it's a very dangerous road, and that it may have been a trap. And yet the Samaritan goes out of his way in the opposite direction. He goes out of his way to help the man. He treats his wounds. He transports him to an inn. He continues to care for him. He pays for his care. And then he comes back to check on him. So even if he had some sense of duty here, he's gone above and beyond, far beyond what could have ever been expected of him. Now, when Jesus told this story, and I imagine he knew this was going to happen, those who were listening to him must have stood there with their mouths hanging open. You know, they must have thought, what? Who is this man that he would tell this type of story to us? They must have been appalled. And then you'll notice that the table gets turned on the lawyer. The lawyer is either trying to trick Jesus, or he's trying to find out what exactly it is that he has to do to be a neighbor, and then do just that and nothing more. And so Jesus turns the tables on him, and he says, who in the story was the neighbor? And the man has to admit that it was the Samaritan. I mean, the words must have just stuck in his throat. And you'll notice that he never says the word Samaritan. He says, the one who showed kindness. And yet, like I said, he must have just choked on it. Because the one who showed kindness is the one who he views as a despised enemy. The one who showed kindness, the one who is the example of goodness and grace, is his enemy. Someone who is thought to be godless. It was absolutely scandalous. So, when we put all that in context, there's a whole lot more here than giving people a gallon of gas when they run out of fuel on the road. The question I think we are compelled to ask ourselves is this. Who are the unexpected, I'm going to use the word unexpected, who are the unexpected candidates for our neighborly relationships? Who are the unexpected candidates for our neighborly relationships? Not only to whom do we reach out, but who do we allow to help us? Who are the candidates, unexpected candidates, for our neighborly relationships? Let me give you a couple examples of what I mean. This story is told by a commentator named Robert Wallace, and it's a true story. It's about a little 12-year-old boy, a Palestinian child who lives in the Gaza Strip, who about 2 years ago was shot and killed by Israeli soldiers because he had a toy gun and was out on the street. Well, he didn't die immediately. He was taken to an Israeli hospital, which is actually, if you know anything about Palestine and Israel, that's really sort of the amazing part of the story, is that he was taken to an Israeli hospital. And he was treated there, but he died. His family then made an unbelievable decision. They donated his heart, his lungs, his eyes, I think maybe some other organs, not to Palestinians, but to Israelis. They made that intentional decision. And in doing so, were neighbors to their enemies. Here's another story told by Richard Jensen. It took place during the Desert Storm War in Iraq. It seems that there was a soldier, a private, who was listed as missing in action because there was no body available to show that he had died, and yet somehow his group lost track of him in the fighting. No one knew where he was. About a week after the war ended, after the fighting ceased, this young man showed up on the main road. And although he had been injured, he was able to walk, and he was well, and everyone was shocked to see him and wanted to know his story. Well, this was his story. He was shot during the fighting in the legs. He was in sort of a out-of-the-way place, away from his comrades, and he had to just lay there hoping that someone would spot him because he couldn't move. And indeed, in the second day of his ordeal, someone did come and rescue him, an Iraqi named Ahmed. It turns out that Ahmed had seen him and was watching him and saw two American Jeeps go by him, not seeing him for whatever reason. And so he thought, well, I have to do something. So he went out, picked up this private, took him across the enemy line, across into their territory, where he was treated at a medical facility, treated well. Ahmed went to visit him every day. And then when the fighting ceased, he was released. And he was well enough to be placed on the main road and picked up by his fellow Americans. Now, of course, this private was thankful for the unexpected help that he had received. But those listening to him were skeptical, particularly one man who, for whatever reason, did not believe the story, thought that maybe the private had been hiding out somewhere. And when he was questioned why he didn't believe it, he said, well, I'll tell you why. Because there's no such thing as a good Iraqi. Well, I can see Jesus telling this story, and the people gathered there saying, this obviously isn't a true story, because there's no such thing as a kind Samaritan. So I'll ask this again. Who are the unexpected candidates for our neighborly relationships? Who might we show kindness to? And from whom might we be given kindness? It's an important question, because kindness is one of those commodities that seems to be sort of slipping away in our world. Another writer named Douglas John Hall says that in our society we value equality more than compassion, and we value justice more than mercy. And then he goes on to quote Kurt Vonnegut. And he tells this story about Kurt Vonnegut being approached by a young man who's just really overwhelmed by the state of the world. And Kurt Vonnegut says to him, well, it's okay, let me tell you this. Now, I've edited this a bit for church appropriateness, just anyway. This was Vonnegut's response. Welcome to the earth, young man. It's hot in the summer and cold in the winter. It's round and wet and crowded. At the outside, Joe, you've got about 100 years here. There's only one rule that I know of. Gosh darn it, Joe, you've got to be kind. today's gospel lesson teaches us that we are expected to be kind. But it teaches us something even more important than that. It teaches us to expect kindness from unexpected places, which reminds us that God works in the world in unexpected ways that are beyond the parameters that we place on how God might function. So, one more time. Who are the candidates for our neighborly relationships? Might it be the children who are here as a part of the out-of-the-box outreach and their families? Who else? Are we the recipients of their kindness? It's an important question, because it is in such kindness that God's kindness is revealed.